The baby's cries tore through the crowded marketplace like a haunting echo of pain and helplessness. Heads turned briefly, but no one stopped. The young mother stood trembling, her arms clutching her frail child as though her love alone could shield him from hunger. Her lips quivered, her eyes brimmed with silent despair, and her body shook not from the cool air but from exhaustion and fear. She had tried all day to soothe him, to hush his cries, to believe she could make it through one more hour. But the truth pressed down on her like a storm. Her baby was hungry, and she had nothing left to give. Her heart pounded as she lowered her gaze, ashamed of the curious stares. It was the kind of shame that burns the soul, not because she was careless, but because life had cornered her with merciless cruelty. Every mother dreams of protecting her child, of giving warmth, food, and security. Yet here she was, her arms full but her hands empty. She whispered broken apologies into her baby's ear, her tears falling softly onto his small blanket. She wished someone, anyone, would help. But in a world where most people walked faster past suffering, help seemed like a dream that had forgotten her name. And then, something happened. But before I take you deeper into this story of heartbreak, hope, and unexpected love, I want to pause for just a moment. If you believe in kindness, in the power of second chances, and in the beauty of humanity when we choose compassion over indifference, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your small action can help spread these stories of hope to someone who needs to hear them today. Now, back to her story. The young woman's name was Rachel. Life had not been kind to her. Just 2 years earlier, she had been married, hopeful, and safe. But tragedy arrived without warning. Her husband, a factory worker, lost his life in a sudden accident, leaving her a widow before she even turned 25. Since then, survival had been her only focus. With no education beyond high school, no savings, and no family willing to take her in, she was forced to face the harsh reality of life alone with her newborn son, Benjamin, little Ben. The marketplace was her last resort. She had tried odd jobs, but most employers turned her away when they saw she had a baby strapped to her back. She had skipped meals for days, stretching every coin she found by selling little handmade trinkets. But now her body was weak, her breast milk had dried up from malnutrition, and Ben's cries grew louder each day. She stood there, in the heart of the bustling bazaar, not to beg for money, but to pray that some miracle might appear among the strangers rushing past her. And that was when a man named Luke noticed her. He wasn't rich, he wasn't extraordinary, and he wasn't looking for anything more than vegetables to take home for dinner. But something about the sound of that baby's cry cut through him. He stopped in his tracks, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on her, this fragile young woman swaying on her feet, her child pressed desperately against her chest. Luke could have walked on like everyone else. But something inside him refused to. He walked toward her, slowly, almost cautiously, as though afraid his presence might frighten her. He saw the hollowness in her eyes, the way her lips trembled, the way her hands shook as she tried to hush her baby. Without asking questions, without demanding explanations, he stepped away from the noise of the market and went to the nearest food stall. Minutes later, he returned with a small carton of milk, a warm loaf of bread, and a gentle firmness in his eyes. When he held out the milk, Rachel froze. Her pride told her not to accept, but her baby's cries told her she had no choice. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered a trembling thank you. With shaking hands, she held the bottle to Ben's lips, and for the first time in hours, the baby's cries turned into soft, desperate gulps. The sound of her son finally feeding broke her heart open, and she sobbed uncontrollably. People around glanced curiously, but Luke didn't look away. He stayed, quietly, giving her the dignity of silence. For Rachel, it felt as if the world had suddenly shifted. She had been invisible for so long, and now here was someone, not offering pity, not judging, but simply being kind. That moment carved itself into her soul. In the days that followed, Luke couldn't shake the image of her from his mind. He went back to the marketplace again, hoping to see her, half ashamed of his curiosity. And there she was, still standing with her trinkets, her baby swaddled close, her face carrying the weight of survival. This time, he didn't just hand her food. He bought every item she had on her small cloth mat. He paid more than she asked, enough to let her breathe for a few days. At first, Rachel felt uneasy. She had met kindness before, but often it came with expectations, with hidden intentions that left her feeling unsafe. But Luke was different. He spoke little, asked nothing of her, and always greeted her with a quiet respect. He didn't treat her like a beggar. He treated her like a person. And slowly, painfully, she began to trust again. Weeks turned into months. Luke kept showing up. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to buy her little handmade bracelets. Each time, Ben's tiny face lit up at the sight of him, as though the baby could sense the goodness radiating from this man. Luke never overstepped, never forced himself into her world. He simply became a steady presence, the kind she had long forgotten existed. But life had taught Rachel to fear hope. She resisted it fiercely. At night, she would hold her baby and cry, wondering if she was being foolish to let this man's kindness touch her heart. What if it was temporary? What if it ended like everything else? Yet in her deepest despair, she realized something. Sometimes love doesn't enter your life with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes, it arrives in the quiet act of feeding a hungry baby, in the steady footsteps of someone who chooses not to walk away. One cold evening, when the marketplace was nearly empty, Rachel felt her strength finally give way. She collapsed onto a bench, dizzy from hunger. Ben stirred in her arms, beginning to cry again. Before fear could overwhelm her, she felt a coat draped gently over her shoulders. Luke knelt beside her, his eyes full of worry. That night, instead of leaving her in the marketplace, he brought her and Ben to his sister's home, a warm, modest place where she was given food, rest, and safety. For the first time in years, Rachel slept without fear. She woke up to the sound of Ben giggling as Luke's sister played with him. Her heart ached with gratitude, and yet a question gnawed at her: could she truly allow herself to belong again? Time answered for her. What began as kindness grew into trust, and what grew into trust blossomed into something deeper. Luke never asked her for anything, yet his actions spoke louder than any promises. He stood by her, supported her efforts to start selling her trinkets online, and encouraged her to dream again. Months later, standing under the golden glow of an evening sky, Rachel realized that the man who had once fed her hungry baby had become the love she never expected. It wasn't the kind of love that rushed in, it was the kind that patiently waited, quietly healed, and rebuilt her shattered faith in life. Her journey hadn't been easy, and her scars would always remain. But when she looked at Luke holding Ben in his arms, she no longer saw despair. She saw the family she thought she had lost forever. And that, dear listeners, is the extraordinary truth about kindness. It doesn't just feed an empty stomach, it feeds the soul, it heals the broken, and sometimes, it builds the love stories we never saw coming. If this story has touched your heart today, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world, love still exists, and kindness can change lives. Before we end, I have a special request. Please comment below with the words, "Kindness is powerful," to let us know this story reached you. Because in the end, it wasn't wealth, status, or perfection that saved Rachel and Ben. It was a simple act of compassion, the act of feeding a hungry baby, that turned into a love story they never expected.